Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepytime Tales, a sleep aid podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Do you find that your mind spins and churns? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems. The ones that you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns but slowly letting go and drifting into the deep night. This week I would like to encourage as many listeners as possible to sign up for my newsletter. I've been quite active on social media and the website the last few weeks. I've been compiling a whole bunch of resources for insomniacs and other people who struggle to sleep. And I'm going to start sending out a weekly newsletter with links to some of the better resources, things for people to try help themselves, besides the podcast, obviously, to help them get a restful night, as well as inform people of launches of episodes, bonus episodes, anything else that I think people might be interested in. So if everyone could please go to the website, sleepytimetales.net. If you've never been to the website before, you should get a pop-up that asks you to sign up for the newsletter, or it's there on the main screen. So I'd like to ask as many people as possible to go and sign up so that I can keep you informed about things that I share and find that are quite interesting without you having to follow along on social media all the time. Now, besides the newsletter, I also want to just mention the Audibletrial. Like many podcasts, I've got a partnership with Audible. If you sign up for a 30-day free trial, you get a free audiobook to keep. And I get a little kickback that helps me cover podcast costs. So if you want to hit the link in the show notes or go to audibletrial.com/sleepytime to give a little support there, that will be much appreciated. Doesn't cost you a cent and is a huge help to me. I've now got 2 episodes out of, actually as you listen to this, my 3rd episode will be out of the catnaps. Those are the bonus mini-sodes that are available to all patrons, $1 and up, and also available for free on Radio Public. So if you want to give those a listen, there's a couple options for you. A mere $1 a month gets you an extra bonus episode every week, or you can listen for free on Radio Public, but then you get advertising, and I don't know what that's like. So yeah, a reminder, swing past the website, sign up with it for the email newsletter, and I'm going to start sending those out soon. And yeah, that's it. A reminder that the music in this episode, and well, all episodes that I've had so far, this is now number 23, is Undiza by Kumiku. Their music is available on the Free Music Archive, and I've linked their website and their Patreon in the show notes because they've got some very cool stuff, and I think many of you would like to take a listen, and if any of you can, it would be nice actually to help them out financially a little bit as well, if you can. Thank you for that. So what exactly is Sleepytime Tales, and what is a sleep aid podcast? To answer your question, let me start with a common problem. Do you find that at night when you go to bed, you lie awake with your mind spinning, emotions in turmoil and stressed out at the anxieties of modern life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find that you can't quite doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to talk you into a restful night. I'm someone who, I've always struggled to sleep. Ever since I was a baby, I used to keep my parents awake at night. I was an absolute nightmare. And even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, I always struggled to sleep. I eventually discovered that the tendency of droning male voices put me into a deep sleep. I used to listen to podcasts when I went to bed at night because I wasn't really driving, and I always wanted to putting things backwards. I tend to listen to podcasts when I drive. But when I was younger and I wasn't really driving much, I was interested in video games and stuff like that. So I would listen to podcasts when I went to bed at night. But I would find myself waking up when they got to the theme music at the end, and I'd missed everything. I eventually even started to listen to some older podcasts specifically for the purpose of sleeping. And then one day I found out that sleep aid podcasts are a thing. They're not very common, but there's a few out there of different formats to help different people. The one that I tried that worked very well for me was designed specifically for distracting the restless mind. It had a long intro and a boring story that was confusing and would not hold your attention, and I found myself falling asleep very fast. But now, while it worked for me, whenever I recommended it to other people, a lot of them didn't like it. Most of them didn't really like the narrator's voice. Well, as I said, it worked very well for me, but so I wondered if I could make something with my own boring, drony voice that would work as well for other people. So I came up with Sleepytime Tales. Every episode starts with this long, slightly rambling intro, and while not everybody likes it, it is there for a reason. The main purpose, well, there's two purposes. The first one is to explain to new listeners the purpose of the show and exactly how I believe they should engage with it. And for people who've been around for a while, I've even had a couple tell me that it's a very important part of their sort of sleep process. This is the time for them to have a quick little glass of water, climb into bed, make sure the environment's warm but not too warm, wrap themselves up nicely. And for you new listeners, just to explain to you, the idea is you listen to me closely as I tell you the story, as I tell you tonight's story. That you listen, and that stops your mind from spinning out of control. Many of us insomniacs have that problem where we get into these feedback loops where our mind just goes and goes and goes on little things, little stresses and niggles, usually not even major things, but like little embarrassing moments that have happened during the day or sometimes even happened in the past. Now, the idea is you listen to me and my boring, drony voice stops that mind from that spinning from happening, that you pay just enough attention to the story that your mind doesn't wander. Tonight I'm telling you a couple of little African folk tales from the collection compiled by James A. Honey in 1910. They're quite cute, quirky little stories, some of them, but I've tried to deliver them in a way that is interesting enough to hold your attention, but doesn't hold your attention so much that you just want to hear the next moment and are desperate to hear it rather than falling asleep. But now, it's very important that you don't force it. You need to listen and just keep a light mental grip on my voice and of the thread of the story so that, like I say, you're not so focused that you can't get to sleep, but your mind doesn't spin into overdrive the way I'm sure yours does, as mine does. But now, while I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, it is very important that you don't feel pressurized. It's entirely possible that if this is your first night, it's not going to work for you. It may take a few nights for you to develop the habit of trying to sleep and of developing a process and sitting down and lying down and turning the lights off. And you're probably listening on your phone, but make sure you're not looking at it. Put my phone in my pocket. Pajama pants have pockets in them, so I put my earbuds in and my phone in my pocket so the light doesn't distract me. It may take a few nights for you to develop this habit of listening. My accent may be a little bit strange to you. It's a bit of an unusual one that you may not have heard. Maybe an episode just isn't long enough. But it is very important that whatever happens tonight, you try to relax. If you're new to the show and you're prone to late nights, staring at the ceiling, it may take a while for this to work for you. So queue up a few episodes, or just stream through the backlog. What I do with Sleep Aid Podcast is, as I said, I start streaming, I put my phone in my pocket, I put the earbuds in, and I just let them run all night. I lie down in the dark with the earbuds in and just let it go. Sometimes when I wake up at 3 a.m., the stream is still running, and I just hold onto that voice just lightly, and then it wafts me back to sleep. Sometimes, and this is actually one of my favorite things, I wake up about 30 minutes before my alarm goes. Usually I still carry on listening, and I fall asleep again. I've got to tell you now that 30 minutes is sometimes the best part of my night. There just seems to be something about allowing yourself complete relaxation right before the alarm that's just so deeply satisfying. And so you have the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark. And while you lie in the dark, I tell you a tale. So again, relax, dear listener. My nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. If this is your first night, that might seem like quite a strange idea, but I know there are some of you that have been listening to me for a while now, and I feel like in some ways we have a sort of connection. I'm someone who struggles to sleep, and I know what you're going through, and I'm trying to help you in ways that other people have helped me. So listen to my voice. I can promise you that you will always be safe with me. I'm here to help you to relax, to improve your life in a small way, or maybe it's not even so small. Insomnia is a healthcare crisis these days. People don't sleep, and it makes life very hard, and it's very bad for your health. So I'm here to do a small part, to help you in a big way, to help you to face tomorrow and the day after, well rested and better able to cope and process. I try to avoid stories that remind you of the stresses of life. I go for little fantasies and harmless little folk tales. Because, as I say, I'm all about kindness and joy, and I want to help you, dear listener, dear friend. I believe very strongly in the benefits and importance of kindness. I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. And it's very important here. I need you to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Don't rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't let go and can't get over the edge, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep. If you're here listening to me, I think we have this in common, that we've had nights where we're just so frustrated that we can't let go and can't sleep and just can't drift away, and it just doesn't happen. But that frustration is not going to help you. The intention with this podcast is to cut off that frustration, to distract that feeling that we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath. Forgive the fact that you can't sleep, and let my voice wash over you and under you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep and to a better life starting tomorrow. And if you just can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy. But it is not your enemy. It is a natural process that we've been pulled away from. Modern life is stressful, and we have these devices that shine bright blue lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Myths of Southern Africa, Part 1. As I've been researching various material for this podcast, some of my more popular episodes have been the Greek mythology ones so far. Those are the ones that seem to get the really good downloads, which is pretty cool to see. But I was thinking the other day about maybe trying something a little bit different as far as mythologies go. I'm from South Africa, my wife is from Zimbabwe, and she mentioned to me the other day that maybe I should think about referring to the myths more of the cultures where we're from. Now, I'm of European extraction, mostly Portuguese, so I grew up in a very European household. But there are a lot of traditional African myths out there that are rather interesting, and I've been reading through some of them. I'm going to share a couple here tonight with you. But the thing that I find interesting from them, I'm sharing from a collection by James Honey of Southern African folktales. Now, the interesting thing is, James Honey was an American man who spent some time in Southern Africa and compiled some collection, a collection of mythology, a little book with some of the myths. But the thing that I found rather interesting going through them is they were written for an American audience, and there's a lot of these stories that have a very sort of Uncle Remus sense to them, Brer Rabbit and Brer Wolf and sort of stuff that I don't believe is very originally African, at least not as directly of not a direct provenance as Mr. Honey claimed. I suspect that many of the stories that he took, if he meant that authentically, were sort of put through a sort of filter that would be understood more by Americans. So there's some quite odd things that, as I go through, I'm going to refer to. Also, something a sort of that stands out in 2019 from a book compiled in the year 1910 is that there's some very extremely racist language that's just not acceptable in this day and age. The sort of thing that was just endemic to culture, particularly European colonial culture back in the day. So I'm going to try filtering some of that stuff out. So if some things seem a little bit odd, it's me trying not to be too racist. Well, trying not to be at all racist and filtering out stuff from back in the day. Anyway, that's enough of a preamble. Let's get to the story. First up, The Lost Message. Now, this is a story about ants. Now, anyone who knows anything about ants will know that while they're very hard-working creatures and famously very strong, they tend to be quite vicious. I remember in school we used to watch documentary shows about ant colonies when they met each other, how viciously they fight and attack each other. Ants have many, many predators. And the story refers to their predators as enemies. Ants have many enemies because they're small and because they're extremely destructive. The enemies include many, many birds. There are a lot of birds out there that eat insects, and ants are a very easy target for them. Of course, there are anteaters, which are famous for, eating ants, hence the name. And the centipede itself is even a smaller but equally vicious predator of the little hard-working ants. After some time of living essentially under attack, some ants decided to hold a council. They all agreed, all types of ants agreed, that it was important for them to try form communities to protect themselves against all their enemies, to find somewhere safe that they could all share and protect themselves and protect each other in a spirit of community. Now, anyone who's seen these documentaries about ants communities meeting each other knows there is no ant community between different species, and even different colonies of the same species, to be honest. Ant colonies are very hard-working and unified things, but two colonies is one colony too many. However, they all stuck to the plan of forming a council one time, and they gave it a try. The red ants arrived, and the rice ants arrived, and the black ants arrived. There were also wagtail ants, and grey ants, and shining ants, and many other types of ants. They all got together in their great council, and the size of ant colonies, and must have been billions of the things all trying to have a say. must have been something like a Tower of Babel, such diverse viewpoints and perspectives, and ants already predisposed not to really get on with each other. It must have been quite a bedlam. As I said, ants have many enemies, and those enemies often include other ants. Some of the ant species wanted to go into small holes in the ground. They believed that if they dug and hid and dug away, they would be safe from their predators, from their enemies, and from anything out to cause them harm. There were other types of ants that believed that they should build large, robust dwellings on the top of the earth. Surface dwellings that were difficult to enter, that only they could get into with its tiny little holes. There were some species of ants that believed that they should go and move into the trees, that they would be safe in the trees away from the anteaters. Of course, those ants forgot that birds live in trees, and so by going up into the trees, they would be closer to those particular enemies. Some of the ants even decided that they should grow wings and fly to safety and stay away from their enemies and dodge and hide. The debate went on interminably. It went on, and they never came to any kind of agreement. Eventually, after many hours, maybe even days, each species went on its way, and each one took responsibility for its own safety, and they all did their own work. Now, the work ethic of ants is legendary. The unity in an ant colony is almost without equal. They all work towards a common goal, guided by the queens. Most of the ants, of course, in the stories as they tell them back in 1910, they say that the ants chose kings. Of course, we know in this day and age that ants don't have kings, but they have queens. Before real study happened, it was often believed that it was actually a belief that goes back to Aristotle, actually, that even in animals, females were not capable of leading anything. Aristotle wasn't, I don't think, was a big believer in the power and authority of queens, and he applied that sort of attitude to nature. It was actually bees in particular. It was only something like the 19th century that they discovered that queen bees are actually females. They believed that they were king bees. And so the assumption in the story is pretty much the same, that the leader of a colony of ants would have to have been a king. But of course, we know in this day and age that it's a queen. Male ants, like male bees, are pretty useless things that just exist purely for the purpose of breeding, and don't last much longer once they've fulfilled their jobs. Even the hardest working creatures, the workers, are not males, they're all females. So those ants that were not crowned as queens all did the work. It was divided up fairly, and they all did what they needed to do. Each species of ant was applied its legendary work ethic to the agreed goal of that colony. However, common among all the species, all the hard work they did was pretty much all in vain, because they were separated and disagreed about everything. They all failed to consider their enemies, the anteaters, the birds, and the centipedes. Red ants build their large, strong houses on the grounds, large ant hills made almost as hard as rock. But anteaters have strong claws that leveled their home. All that work was wasted, and many ants were lost to the rapacious anteaters. Rice ants didn't fare any better. They opted to live underground, digging in little holes and disappearing under the earth, and every time they came out, they found the anteater with its sticky tongue waiting, and birds could often wait as well. Creatures like hardy-daws, sacred ibises, could poke their beaks into the earth and find the ants under the ground. Wagtail ants took to the trees. They did manage to stay away from the anteaters, but they got much closer to the birds. The birds were waiting for them, and there were centipedes living in the trees as well, waiting for them to come, which they did. The species of grey ants took to flight to keep away from their enemies. Well, that seemed like a good idea at first. There were lizards, and there were spiders, and there were birds that they couldn't avoid. Many grey ant found itself stuck in a spider web and a victim of its enemy. Eventually, one day, the king of the insects heard of the struggles of the ants. He sympathized with them, and he sent them a message to them to encourage them to unify, to work together. He gave the message to the beetle to send out to the colonies of the ants very urgently, and the beetle set off as fast as he could. Unfortunately, if you've ever seen a beetle walking, you'd know that that's really not very fast. So the beetle is so slow, the ants have still never received the message, and so they still struggle and fight against each other and make themselves easy prey for their enemies. Quite an interesting little story, that one. I didn't have any idea who the insect king would be. It's an interesting part of the story that has no clarity. And now we move on to the monkey's fiddle. The monkey lived in a land which unfortunately was going through a bit of a famine. Monkey was first forced by hunger and want to leave the land and seek among strangers for work. Everything that he ate was exhausted in his land. Now monkeys eat almost anything. They eat bulbs and nuts and beans and anything that they can dig out of the ground or pluck off the trees. They even eat scorpions and insects, so they can find pretty much anything. But the famine in the monkey's land was so bad, he couldn't stay, and he had to leave. But he received shelter from his uncle, the orangutan, in another part of the country. Now, of course, this is an interesting thing because, as I said, this is a southern African story, and there are no orangutans in Africa, and there never have been. This is one of those things where I mentioned in the beginning that there's a sort of Uncle Remus-like quality to some of the story. Like there are assumptions that there are animals in Africa that were never there. Although one theory of mine, that the orangutan, it comes from Malay myths and stories, something not many people know about South Africa who don't live there, is that there was a very significant imported Malay workers who used to work in the Cape. Some of the South African food traditions, cooking meat with fruit and stuff like that, particularly in Afrikaans culture, is very much a Malay thing. The Malays were basically brought across as indentured workers and were treated, well, let's be honest, pretty badly by the colonies, but most of them stayed. And aspects of their culture, particularly their food, and it looks like some of the stories were subsumed into local stories. After a while, the monkey worked really hard for his uncle. He helped him a lot, and he had great success, and he helped his uncle. And after a while, he decided to return home because he heard that the worst of the famine was over. The uncle was very grateful for the monkey's help, so he rewarded the monkey with two wonderful, wonderful rewards. He gave him a fiddle, and he gave him a bow and arrow. Both were wondrous things. The bow and arrow could hit and kill anything and bring it down, and the fiddle, if played skillfully enough, could force any listener to dance. So Monkey traveled back to his home, and once he got there, for the first time he met Brer Wolf. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, sort of Uncle Remus type things. There's never been anything like a wolf in Africa. There are various wild canines, foxes and jackals in the type, but wolves, as far as I know, have never been in Africa, so I think the introduction of Brer Wolf part of the story comes from an American source, is my theory. So I think James Honey, when he compiled his story, maybe introduced a little bit of Americana in it to appeal more to his readers, local readers. Now, Brer Wolf told Monkey all about the news of home, told him about the things that had gone on in the time that he had been gone. It gave him a lot of news about friends and family that he had missed very badly. Wolf did complain, however, that he had spent the whole day stalking a deer, and it had been in vain. His hunt had been unsuccessful. So Monkey told the wolf about the wonders of the bow and arrow. He asked Wolf to take him on a hunt and take him to find the deer, and he would bring the deer down. And so they set out on the hunt together, the wolf tracking and trying to find the deer, and the monkey ready to fire as soon as he saw it. Eventually they tracked the deer down. The wolf pointed it out. Monkey aimed his bow, fired an arrow, and he brought the deer down. So they sat down and had a wonderful meal with deer, packed some up and hung it to dry for a longer term meal. This was a large deer and was too much meal for one wolf and one monkey. But as the meal went on, the wolf became jealous. He became jealous of Monkey's wonderful bow and arrow, with which hunting would be so much easier. He begged and he pleaded the monkey to give him the bow and arrow. He offered great rewards and anything that he would want. But Monkey was grateful to his uncle, the orangutan, for giving him such a wonderful reward, and grateful for him helping him out and helping each other out for their time while he was there. So he refused. Eventually, Wolf started to threaten the monkey. He got a little bit up in his face and started making out like things were going to get violent. Monkey still refused, but then Jackal came by and saw the altercation. He interrupted and asked what was going on. Wolf, seeing the opportunity, because Monkey had a bit of a reputation for being a mischievous sort, told the Jackal that Monkey had stolen Wolf's bow and arrow from him. Now Jackal listened to the stories, but he couldn't really decide who was in the right. He just said that he was unqualified to decide, so he said that they would bring the matter to the court. The animal court was where most of the great animals judged on disputes. There were lions and tigers among the animals. Now, of course, again, tigers are a offshoot of species probably from Africa, but the tigers themselves have never been in Africa. They evolved in Asia. So again, this is a suggestion that the story has a lot of outside influences. However, on their way to the court, Jackal and Wolf both got excited about the bow and arrow. They brought down everything that they could eat and slaughter, even more than they could eat and slaughter. They hunted down everything that they could find, and eventually Monkey and Wolf agreed to go to the court. They went in front of the lion and the tiger and the elephant, all the wise animals of the savannah and the jungle alike. Monkey gave his evidence about going and staying with his uncle and working for him and being rewarded with the wondrous bow and arrow. However, even as he said it, Monkey realized that the evidence sounded rather weak. Jackal even decided to take sides in his testimony, despite the fact that he had said before that he wasn't qualified to make a decision. He thought it would be easier for him to get the bow and arrow from Wolf rather than Monkey, because he decided he wanted the wondrous bow and arrow to make his own life a lot easier. And so Wolf and Jackal both testified against Monkey, and Jackal seemed impartial, so the court found against Monkey. The animals took Steph very seriously. They decided that as a thief, Monkey must hang. Monkey hung his head and didn't complain because he knew it wouldn't be worthwhile. However, he still had his magical fiddle. When the courts offered him his last request, he asked if he could just play one song, and then he would meet his fate. The court decided to allow it because they didn't know that there was anything to worry about. Now, Monkey, I haven't mentioned, was a master fiddle player. So he lifted the fiddle up to his chin and started to play. He started out playing a vigorous song, forced everybody to dance. The whole court and all the animals come to see the trial, and all the animals, the lions and the tigers that had sat in judgment, all danced vigorously and in an unusually furious liveliness. It was a whirlwind dance that they flew around the courtroom and in the open, over and over and quicker. Monkey played his fiddle. He played and he played and he played and he played, and he played over and faster, and eventually some of the dancers began to fall exhausted. They fell and got up again, and fell and got up, and then fell, and they couldn't get up again because they were so exhausted, but still they tried to dance. Monkey was so engrossed in the music, so enjoying playing, that he didn't even notice what was going on. He didn't see what the dancers were going through. He knew that he was forcing them to dance, but he was so engrossed in the playing that he didn't actually see how badly the animals of the court were struggling. The lion was dancing with his bride over and over again, cheek to cheek, whirling around Monkey. Eventually he got close enough to Monkey, and he said, Monkey, please stop playing, and I'll give you my entire kingdom, but please stop playing. But Monkey refused. He didn't want a kingdom. He was innocent. Wolf had tried to steal from him, and Jackal was plotting to try to steal from Wolf, and he'd been sentenced to hang for the crime of having something that others wanted. So he said to Lion, I will play and I will play unless you change your finding against me, and I will play and I will play unless Wolf tells the truth about what happened. I demand that you withdraw the sentence, that you return my property, and that Wolf acknowledges what he has done. Wolf cried out, I acknowledge. He was beyond exhaustion, and he was already a rather lazy creature, as we saw, because he was doing anything he could to make his own life easier. I acknowledge, cried Wolf. Monkey played a few more bars just to highlight to everybody the importance that they complied with what they promised. Then he stopped. The dancers stopped and they all collapsed. Monkey was a little bit suspicious of the motivations of all the creatures, so he gathered his bow and arrow, put his fiddle on his side, and he climbed into a tree. He decided he should probably stay a safe distance away, just in case things went a little bit wrong. The court and the animals were all so afraid of what happened that they were scared of falling under Monkey's thrall again, that they all dispersed across the world, just to stay away from Monkey and his fiddle. I'm going to share one more story here. This is the tiger, the ram, and the jackal. Now this story starts out by saying tiger, and in brackets leopard, was returning home from hunting on one occasion when he lighted on the kraal of the ram. So it's possible that Honey, when he was doing the translations and rewriting the stories, that he figured American audiences probably would be more familiar with tigers than leopards. So maybe, even in the previous story, tiger should be read as leopard. So anyway, leopard was returning home from hunting on one occasion when he came across the kraal of ram. Now, people who don't know, a kraal is basically a cattle enclosure, usually made out of thorn trees. Now, leopard had never seen ram, and so when he came to meet him, he was quite submissive. He didn't meet his eyes in the African way and said, "Good day, friend, what may your name be?" The other person said in his gruff voice, and striking his breast with his forefoot with his hoof, said, "I am Ram. Who are you?" Leopard, answered the other, really making himself look more pathetic than ever, and he basically was working very hard to not look like a threat. He took leave of Ram and ran home as fast as he could. Now Jackal was living in the same place that Leopard did, and when Leopard came to him, Leopard said, "Jackal, I'm out of breath and I'm half dead with fright. For I've just seen a terrible-looking fellow with a large and thick head." And on my asking him what his name was, he answered, "I am Ram." Now Jackal was very disappointed in Tiger. Well, Leopard. I'm trying to avoid saying Tiger from now. Jackal was extremely disappointed in Leopard. He said, "Ram is just a stupid sheep, a large meal for the likes of you and I. Why did you run away? Why were you so submissive? We'll go down tomorrow, and we will eat a really good meal together." The next day the two set off for the kraal of Ram, and as they appeared over the hill, Ram, who had come outside to take a look around and was deciding where he was going to start planting his crops, saw them coming. He went to his wife and he said to her, "I fear that this might be our last day, for Jackal and Tiger are both coming against us. What shall we do?" His wife said to him, "Don't be afraid, but take up the child in your arms and go out with it, and pinch it to make it cry as if it were hungry." Ram did so as leopard and Jackal came on. No sooner did Tiger see Ram than he got fear took him again. He wanted to turn back, but Jackal didn't allow it. He tied Tiger to himself and said, "Come on." He basically had Tiger on a leash. When Ram cried in a loud voice and pinched his child, he said, "You have done very well, friend Jackal. You brought us the leopard to eat, for you hear how my child is crying out for food." Now, Tiger was already scared of Ram at the best of times, and when he thought Jackal was leading him to being a meal himself, ran off so fast that he dragged Jackal after him, over the hill and over the valley and through bushes and over rocks. He never stopped once to look behind him until he was back to his and Jackal's home, where Jackal was half dead by the time they got there, and that was how Ram escaped. Now, I've referred a couple of times to Uncle Remus, and some people may not know the context of what that statement is. Now, Uncle Remus is a fictional character and narrator of a collection of African American folk tales that was adapted and compiled by Joel Chandler Harris. It was published as a book in 1881, so actually only 19 years before this collection of short stories by James Honey that I'm sharing stories from. Harris was a journalist in Atlanta in the post-Reconstruction period. I think he had good intentions. He wrote the stories to represent the struggle of the South, and more specifically, people of the plantations. He'd heard these stories told by slaves and freed slaves, and decided to frame them in the context of the plantations. He also wrote the stories in a dialect that was represented the voices of the narrators and their culture. And this is one of the reasons that the Uncle Remus stories are kind of looked down on in this day and age, because although I think Chandler maybe had the best of intentions, 19th century good intentions don't necessarily translate into 21st century suitability. So it's something also in the stories that I'm reading. I'm not reading the stories directly, because a lot of the phrasing is actually very much like that. It's in the vernacular of, and the sort of a dialect of minorities, and it's often used to talk down to minorities, so I don't do that myself. Uncle Remus has appeared in pop culture, obviously nothing very recently. Most famously in the Walt Disney Song of the South, which is it's a technical marvel as a combination of live action and animated movies. Uncle Remus was played by famous vaudeville and radio actor James Baskett. But as far as I know, Song of the South is generally even left out of most Disney compilations in these day and age, because in a 21st century context, it's rather astonishingly racist. This was also Baskett's last role prior to his death 2 years later in 1948. Yes, I'm just checking something on the Wikipedia here. As I said, Disney has yet to release Song of the South on any home video format in the United States, because it's a rather controversial topic. Some critics have described the film's portrayal of African Americans as racist and offensive, and In addition, the plantation setting is sometimes criticized as being idyllic and glorified. Plantations, of course, were horrific for slaves and freed slaves, so anything that whitewashes that is probably not the best thing in a modern context. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of the Sleepytime Tales podcast, the sleep aid podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week, but make sure to subscribe on whatever service you use so that you get new episodes and maybe the odd bonus whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Désert by Kumiku. Check out more of their work on their website and their Patreon, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night and sweet dreams.